The human heart, a labyrinth of desires, fears, and unspoken truths, becomes an even more intricate maze when we speak of love. What truly stirs within us, beneath the surface of attraction and shared moments? What silent forces shape our affections, our attachments, and our deepest vulnerabilities? Today, we embark on a journey into the unsettling depths of the male psyche in love, exploring psychological facts that might disturb, enlighten, and ultimately offer a profound understanding of the often misunderstood landscape of a man's emotional world. Prepare to uncover truths that challenge assumptions and illuminate the hidden currents that dictate how men love, connect, and sometimes withdraw. 1. Men fall for women who bring emotional safety. The notion of emotional safety, while seemingly straightforward, possesses a profound and often underestimated gravity in the context of a man's romantic attachments. It is not merely a preference, it is a foundational pillar upon which genuine love, trust, and vulnerability are constructed within the male psyche. To truly understand this, one must first dismantle the societal scaffolding that often surrounds masculinity, a framework that frequently discourages, if not outright penalizes, the open expression of emotional fragility. From a young age, boys are subtly and sometimes overtly conditioned to embody strength, stoicism, and self-reliance. They are taught that displaying fear, sadness, or uncertainty is a weakness, a chink in the armor of their perceived manliness. This pervasive cultural narrative inadvertently creates an internal landscape within many men that is often devoid of a truly safe space for their own emotions to exist, let alone be expressed. When a man encounters a woman who instinctively, or perhaps consciously, provides an environment of emotional safety, it resonates with a deep, often subconscious yearning. This safety isn't merely the absence of conflict, it's a pervasive sense of non-judgment, unwavering acceptance, and a consistent emotional reliability that allows him to gradually lower his guard. It's the unspoken assurance that his vulnerabilities, his imperfections, and his fears will not be met with ridicule, dismissal, or manipulation. Instead, they will be met with empathy, understanding, and a gentle affirmation that he is seen, truly seen, in his entirety, without the need to perform or project an image of invincibility. This woman becomes a sanctuary, a rare harbor in a world that often demands emotional resilience at the expense of emotional authenticity. Consider the psychological weight of living perpetually behind a facade. Many men navigate their daily lives wearing an emotional mask meticulously constructed to withstand the perceived judgment of peers, family, and even themselves. They might project confidence, unwavering resolve, or a carefree detachment, all while harboring anxieties, insecurities, and a profound desire for connection that extends beyond the superficial. The woman who offers emotional safety is the one who subtly, through her consistent actions and genuine presence, signals that this mask is unnecessary in her presence. She creates a space where he can tentatively remove it one layer at a time, revealing the softer, more vulnerable self he rarely allows the world to see. This process is often gradual, a slow unfurling that builds upon repeated experiences of trust and acceptance. It might begin with a shared laugh that feels truly unburdened, a moment of comfort during a difficult day, or a conversation where his concerns are heard without immediate solutions being imposed or his feelings being minimized. The impact of this emotional safety extends far beyond mere comfort. It acts as a catalyst for deeper emotional attachment and love. When a man feels safe enough to be vulnerable, to share his authentic self, he is simultaneously creating a profound bond. This isn't a love born of fleeting passion or superficial attraction, though those elements may certainly be present. Instead, it is a love rooted in a secure attachment, a feeling of being deeply known and cherished for who he truly is, not just for the image he presents. This psychological mechanism taps into fundamental human needs for belonging, understanding, and unconditional regard. For men who are often denied these spaces in their social conditioning, finding a partner who provides them can feel like discovering a vital missing piece, a profound sense of coming home. It creates an environment where love can flourish not just as an emotion, but as a stable, enduring commitment built on mutual respect and genuine intimacy. 2. Men seek validation silently. The pursuit of validation, an intrinsic human need to feel valued, appreciated, and acknowledged, manifests in men with a peculiar and often misunderstood subtlety. Unlike the more overt expressions of seeking affirmation that might be observed in other contexts, men frequently engage in a silent, almost covert quest for validation within their relationships. This isn't necessarily a conscious strategy, but rather an ingrained behavioral pattern shaped by a complex interplay of societal expectations, personal upbringing, and the inherent desire to feel significant in the eyes of their partner. The societal blueprint for masculinity often dictates self-sufficiency and emotional stoicism, creating an internal conflict where the natural human desire for praise and recognition clashes with the perceived need to appear unbothered and independent. This silent quest for validation often presents itself in actions rather than words. A man might dedicate himself to a demanding project at work, meticulously maintain his physical fitness, or tirelessly provide for his family. Not solely for the inherent satisfaction of these achievements, but also with an underlying, often unarticulated, hope that these efforts will be noticed and appreciated by his partner. His actions become a language, a series of unspoken questions. Am I doing enough? Am I strong enough? Am I worthy of your respect and admiration? He rarely articulates these questions directly, fearing that doing so might expose a vulnerability, a perceived neediness that contradicts the masculine ideal. The silence around this need is therefore a form of self-preservation, an attempt to navigate the delicate balance between desiring affirmation and maintaining an image of self-contained strength. Consider the subtle cues a man might offer hoping for a reciprocal response. He might recount a successful professional achievement, not to boast, but to gauge his partner's reaction, looking for a sparkle of pride in her eyes or a genuine word of commendation. He might fix something around the house, then discreetly observe if his effort is acknowledged, even with a simple thank you. These are not demands for effusive praise, but rather quiet bids for recognition, small tests to see if his contributions, his efforts, and his very presence are truly valued. When these bids are met with indifference, criticism, or a lack of acknowledgement, the impact can be profoundly disheartening, even if he doesn't outwardly express it. The unspoken message he receives, whether intended or not, is that his efforts are unremarkable, his contributions unappreciated, and his significance diminished. The psychological consequence of this silent seeking is that men can often feel perpetually unseen or misunderstood. Because they rarely articulate their need for validation, their partners may remain unaware of it, leading to a communication gap. The partner might assume the man is self-sufficient, requiring little emotional input, while he internally yearns for explicit signs of appreciation. This disconnect can breed resentment and a sense of isolation within the relationship. He might interpret a lack of praise as a lack of love or respect, even if his partner's affection is expressed in other ways. This internal narrative, fueled by unaddressed needs, can slowly erode his sense of self-worth within the relationship, making him feel like his efforts are taken for granted, or that he is merely a functional component rather than a cherished individual. Furthermore, this silent validation seeking can lead to a vicious cycle. The less validation he receives, the more he might withdraw emotionally, or double down on actions he believes will earn him recognition. Yet without clear communication, the underlying need remains unaddressed, perpetuating the cycle of unspoken yearning and unfulfilled emotional requirements. It underscores a fundamental paradox in male emotional expression. The profound desire for connection and affirmation often coexists with a profound reluctance to explicitly ask for it, leaving a significant portion of their emotional landscape hidden in plain sight, waiting to be acknowledged, often in silence. 3. Men love attention but deny it. The human desire for attention is universal, a fundamental aspect of our social wiring that fuels our need for connection and recognition. However, in the realm of male psychology, this desire for attention often exists in a fascinating state of paradox. It is deeply felt, profoundly enjoyed, yet frequently and vehemently denied. This denial is not necessarily a conscious act of deception, but rather a complex psychological defense mechanism, a byproduct of the same societal conditioning that pressures men towards stoicism and self-reliance. To admit a craving for attention can be perceived as a weakness, a sign of vanity or neediness, traits that are often considered antithetical to traditional masculine ideals. From an early age, boys are taught to be the ones who give attention, who lead, who protect, rather than the ones who seek it for emotional sustenance. This conditioning creates an internal conflict. The innate human desire for validation and recognition, which attention provides, clashes with the learned imperative to appear self-sufficient and unaffected. Consequently, when a man receives attention, especially from a romantic partner, it can trigger a complex internal response. On one hand, there's a genuine sense of pleasure, a warmth that affirms his value and desirability. On the other hand, there's an immediate, almost reflexive urge to downplay it, to deflect, or even to pretend indifference. This isn't because he doesn't appreciate it, but because admitting to enjoying it might feel like admitting to a vulnerability, a crack in the armor he works so hard to maintain. Consider how this plays out in everyday interactions. A partner might compliment a man's new haircut, his outfit, or his intelligence. His immediate reaction might be a shrug, a mumbled thanks, or even a self-deprecating joke. He might outwardly dismiss the compliment, saying, "It's nothing," or "You don't have to say that." Yet internally, that compliment registers. It might bring a subtle lift to his mood, a quiet boost to his confidence that he might not even fully acknowledge to himself. The denial is a protective measure, a way to maintain the illusion of being impervious to external validation, even as he secretly savors it. This dynamic can be incredibly confusing for partners who genuinely wish to express their appreciation and affection, as their efforts are met with a seemingly ungrateful or dismissive response. They might interpret his denial as a lack of interest, a sign that their efforts are futile, or even that he doesn't care for them. The type of attention men crave also holds nuance. While superficial compliments might be appreciated, the deeper, more meaningful attention often revolves around being seen, heard, and understood. This includes attention to his thoughts, his ideas, his struggles, and his passions. When a partner genuinely listens to him, remembers details she shared, or shows interest in his hobbies, it constitutes a profound form of attention that resonates deeply. Yet even this profound attention might be met with the same outward nonchalance. He might share a detailed account of a challenging work project, and if his partner listens intently and asks insightful questions, he might respond with a simple, "Yeah, it was okay," rather than expressing the deep satisfaction he feels from being truly heard and engaged with. This denial also serves to manage expectations. By appearing indifferent to attention, a man might subconsciously be attempting to avoid the perceived pressure of constantly needing to earn it, or the disappointment if it's not consistently provided. It's a way of protecting his emotional equilibrium, preventing him from becoming too reliant on external validation. However, the psychological cost of this denial is significant. It creates a barrier to genuine intimacy, as it prevents him from openly sharing his emotional needs and receiving the full benefit of his partner's affection. It can lead to a sense of emotional isolation, where he feels he must perpetually present a strong, self-sufficient front, even to the person he loves most. The paradox remains. Men truly do love attention,
but the complex tapestry of societal expectations and personal conditioning often compel them to navigate this fundamental human need in a silent, often contradictory dance of desire and denial. 4. Men often stay in almost relationships, hoping they evolve. The phenomenon of the almost relationship is a peculiar and often emotionally taxing space, characterized by an ambiguous connection that hovers tantalizingly close to commitment without ever fully materializing into a defined partnership. While both men and women can find themselves ensnared in these nebulous dynamics, men often exhibit a distinct propensity to linger within them, driven by a complex cocktail of hope, fear, and a unique approach to emotional investment. This tendency is not necessarily born of malicious intent or a desire to string someone along, but rather stems from deeper psychological currents that influence male decision-making in matters of the heart.
One primary driver is the inherent hope for evolution. For many men, an almost relationship isn't viewed as a static dead end, but rather as a nascent stage, a potential precursor to something more substantial. They might genuinely believe that with enough time, effort, or perhaps a subtle shift in circumstances, the relationship will naturally progress into a committed partnership. This hope can be particularly potent if there are elements within the almost relationship that resonate with their deeper needs: emotional safety, a sense of understanding, or even just comfortable companionship. They might cling to fleeting moments of intimacy, shared laughter, or profound conversations as evidence of the relationship's untapped potential rather than its current limitations. This optimistic outlook, while sometimes admirable, can also blind them to the reality of the situation, leading them to invest significant emotional energy into a dynamic that lacks a clear future. Another contributing factor is a profound aversion to loss and the effort associated with starting anew. Ending an almost relationship, even one that is clearly unfulfilling, means confronting the emptiness it leaves behind and embarking on the often daunting task of seeking a new connection. For men, who can be creatures of habit and who often invest emotionally once a certain level of comfort is established, the prospect of dismantling an existing, albeit imperfect, connection can be psychologically daunting. The known, even if flawed, can feel safer than the unknown. There's a sunk cost fallacy at play. Having already invested time, emotion, and energy, the idea of abandoning that investment feels wasteful. They might rationalize staying by telling themselves that the potential future reward outweighs the current ambiguity, or that the effort required to find something better is simply too high. Furthermore, the ambiguity inherent in almost relationships can sometimes inadvertently cater to a man's underlying fears of commitment or the demands of a fully defined partnership. The lack of clear boundaries and expectations means less pressure, fewer responsibilities, and a perceived greater degree of freedom. While consciously men desire commitment, subconsciously the open-ended nature of an almost situation can feel less threatening. It allows them to enjoy the benefits of connection and intimacy without having to fully confront the implications of a long-term exclusive bond. This isn't to say they don't want commitment eventually, but the almost phase can serve as a prolonged testing ground, a way to dip their toes in the waters of intimacy without fully diving in, hoping that the water will eventually warm up enough for them to take the plunge. Finally, the societal conditioning around male stoicism plays a role. Men are often less likely to openly discuss their emotional needs or frustrations in ambiguous relationships. They might internalize their hopes and disappointments, silently waiting for the other person to initiate a change or for circumstances to shift. This reluctance to explicitly define the relationship or express their desire for more can inadvertently prolong the almost status, as they wait for a sign, a catalyst, or a moment of clarity that may never arrive without their active participation.
Thus, men often remain in these relational limbos, not out of indifference, but out of a complex blend of hopeful anticipation, an aversion to starting over, and a quiet reluctance to force a definition, all contributing to their sustained presence in the emotionally taxing realm of the almost relationship. 5. Men develop emotional numbness from repeated rejections. The experience of rejection, in any form, carries an inherent sting, a wound to one's self-esteem, and a challenge to one's sense of worth. For men, particularly in the realm of romantic pursuit, repeated rejections can lead to a profound and disturbing psychological adaptation, the development of emotional numbness. This isn't a conscious choice to stop feeling, but rather a protective mechanism, an involuntary physiological and psychological response designed to shield the self from the debilitating pain of constant emotional assault. It's a self-preservation strategy, albeit one with significant long-term consequences for emotional intimacy and connection. From a young age, men are often conditioned to be the initiators in romantic contexts, to pursue, to risk, and, by extension, to face rejection. Each instance of rejection, whether subtle or explicit, chips away at their confidence. It's not just the no that hurts, it's the implicit message that they are not desirable, not good enough, or not worthy of affection. When these messages accumulate over time, the brain begins to adapt. To continuously experience the acute pain of disappointment, shame, and inadequacy becomes unsustainable. Thus, the emotional centers begin to desensitize themselves, building a protective wall, a buffer against future hurt. This wall manifests as numbness. This numbness isn't a complete absence of feeling. Rather, it's a blunting, a dulling of emotional responses. The highs become less exhilarating, and crucially, the lows become less devastating. When a man who has experienced repeated rejections encounters another potential romantic interest, he might approach the situation with a detached caution. He might still feel a flicker of attraction or interest, but the intense hope, the eager anticipation, and the profound vulnerability that characterize early romantic feelings are significantly muted. This blunting serves to minimize the potential impact of another rejection. If he doesn't invest too much emotionally, if he doesn't allow himself to hope too deeply, then the fall won't be as far or as painful. The disturbing aspect of this numbness lies in its insidious nature. While it initially serves as a defense mechanism, it can gradually become a pervasive mode of emotional operation. It doesn't discriminate. The same mechanisms that dull the pain of rejection can also dull the capacity for joy, for deep connection, and for genuine intimacy. A man who has become emotionally numb might find it increasingly difficult to fully engage in a budding relationship, even if the connection is promising. He might struggle to express affection, to open up, or to fully lean into the emotional experiences of love. His emotional responses might appear muted, his enthusiasm tempered, making him seem aloof or disinterested, even when he genuinely cares.
Furthermore, this numbness can create a vicious cycle. His emotional detachment, a consequence of past hurts, can inadvertently push away potential partners who interpret it as a lack of interest or genuine feeling. This further reinforces his belief that he is destined for rejection, strengthening the protective wall and deepening the numbness. He might find himself in relationships where he struggles to feel deeply, leading to a sense of emptiness or dissatisfaction, not because the relationship itself is flawed, but because his own emotional apparatus has been compromised. Overcoming this numbness requires immense courage, a willingness to dismantle those protective walls, and often the consistent, patient emotional safety provided by a partner who understands the depth of his past wounds and is committed to helping him rediscover the capacity for full emotional engagement. The chilling truth is that repeated heartbreak can, quite literally, make the heart less capable of feeling, leaving a man emotionally muted in the very pursuit of love he once so passionately sought. 6. Men attach deeply to the first woman who made them feel understood. The psychological impact of feeling truly understood is profound, a sensation that resonates with a deep, primal human need for connection and validation.
For men, this experience, particularly when it occurs in a romantic context, can forge an exceptionally powerful and enduring attachment to the woman who provides it. This isn't merely about superficial agreement or shared interests. It's about a profound sense of being seen, heard, and accepted on a level that transcends words, penetrating the carefully constructed facades many men maintain. The first woman who offers this rare gift often carves a uniquely indelible place in his emotional landscape. To comprehend the depth of this attachment, one must revisit the earlier discussion of male conditioning. Men are frequently encouraged to be self-sufficient, to suppress vulnerability, and to present an image of unwavering strength. This often leads to a lifetime of internalizing emotions, of navigating challenges in solitude, and of feeling that their deeper anxieties, fears, and even their softer aspirations are not safe for public or even private consumption. They might find themselves surrounded by people, yet still experience a pervasive sense of emotional isolation. When a woman steps into this internal void and demonstrates a genuine capacity to understand his unspoken struggles, his unarticulated dreams, or the nuances of his inner world, it feels like a revelation. It's a moment of profound recognition where the walls he has meticulously built around his emotional core begin to crumble, not through force, but through the gentle warmth of empathy. This understanding isn't necessarily about grand gestures or intellectual debates. It can manifest in subtle ways: a knowing glance that communicates she truly grasps his unspoken frustration, an intuitive response to his mood that indicates she perceives his underlying stress, or a conversation where he feels genuinely listened to without judgment or the immediate imposition of solutions. It's the feeling that she gets him, not just on a superficial level, but at his very core. This experience is often so rare and so deeply satisfying that it creates an immediate and powerful bond. It's as if a fundamental emotional hunger, long denied, is finally being fed. The psychological mechanism at play here is related to secure attachment. When a man feels understood, it fosters a sense of psychological safety and trust. He learns that with this woman, he can be his authentic self, flaws and all, without fear of rejection or misunderstanding. This comfort allows him to explore and express parts of himself that he might have previously kept hidden, even from himself. This process deepens intimacy and creates a powerful emotional anchor. The first aspect is crucial because it often sets a benchmark. This woman becomes the reference point for what true understanding feels like, and the subsequent emotional attachment can be incredibly tenacious precisely because it fulfills such a fundamental, often unmet need. Even if the relationship with this first woman doesn't last, the imprint she leaves can be enduring. She becomes a significant emotional touchstone, a memory of a time when he felt truly seen and accepted. Future relationships might be unconsciously measured against this profound experience of understanding. While he may move on and find love again, the unique emotional resonance of that initial connection, where his soul felt truly exposed and embraced, often lingers, shaping his expectations and desires for all subsequent romantic endeavors. It underscores the powerful, transformative effect of genuine empathy and understanding, especially for men who are often implicitly discouraged it. 7. Men often fake emotional strength. The expectation for men to embody strength, resilience, and an unwavering resolve is a deeply ingrained societal narrative, one that begins in childhood and persists throughout adulthood. This pervasive conditioning often compels men to engage in a subtle yet psychologically taxing performance, the faking of emotional strength. This isn't an act of deliberate deception aimed at manipulating others, but rather a complex coping mechanism, a protective facade erected to meet external expectations and to guard against the perceived vulnerability of authentic emotional expression. The cost of this performance, however, is significant, often leading to internal distress and a profound sense of isolation. From a young age, boys are taught that big boys don't cry, that they must man up, and that displaying fear, sadness, or insecurity is a sign of weakness. These messages, whether explicit or implicit, create an environment where genuine emotional expression is often stifled. As they mature, this internalizes into a belief that admitting to emotional struggle, seeking help, or simply showing vulnerability is antithetical to their masculine identity. Consequently, when faced with personal challenges, emotional pain, or even moments of profound sadness, men instinctively revert to a performance of strength. They might put on a brave face, offer reassuring platitudes, or simply withdraw into silence, all while internally grappling with intense emotional turmoil. This faking of emotional strength manifests in various ways. It could be the man who, despite facing immense professional pressure or personal heartbreak, maintains a calm, collected demeanor, insisting he's fine when he's clearly not. It could be the partner who, after a difficult argument, quickly shifts to a logical problem-solving mode, avoiding any deeper discussion of his own hurt or fear of losing connection. He might deflect attempts to probe his feelings with humor, change the subject, or become irritable, all as a means of diverting attention from his true emotional state. The performance is exhausting, requiring constant vigilance to ensure no cracks appear in the facade.
The psychological toll of this continuous act is immense. Firstly, it creates a profound sense of emotional isolation. By presenting an impenetrable front, a man inadvertently cuts himself off from the very empathy and support he might desperately need. His partner, friends, or family might perceive him as unfeeling or unaffected, making it difficult for them to offer appropriate comfort or understanding. This can lead to a vicious cycle where his perceived strength leads to less emotional support, which in turn reinforces his belief that he must continue to fake strength. Secondly, suppressing emotions does not make them disappear. It merely pushes them underground. Unacknowledged pain, fear, or sadness can fester, manifesting in other, often unhealthy ways. This might include increased irritability, anxiety, depression, substance abuse, or even physical ailments. The energy expended in maintaining the facade diverts resources from genuine emotional processing, preventing him from truly healing or addressing the root causes of his distress. Finally, this faking of strength inhibits genuine intimacy in relationships. True connection is built on vulnerability and authenticity. When a man consistently presents a curated version of himself, he prevents his partner from truly knowing him, from seeing his deeper self. This lack of authentic emotional exchange can lead to a superficiality in the relationship, where both partners feel a sense of distance despite physical proximity. The disturbing truth is that while this performance of strength is often intended to protect, it ultimately isolates and harms, preventing men from experiencing the true liberation and connection that comes with genuine emotional honesty. 8. Men fear losing interest but don't know how to maintain connection. The apprehension of a partner losing interest is a common human fear within romantic relationships, but for men, it often carries a particular psychological weight, coupled with a perplexing struggle in understanding how to actively combat this fear by maintaining connection. This paradox arises from a blend of inherent insecurities, societal conditioning that often prioritizes action over emotional dialogue, and a genuine lack of education in the nuanced art of relational maintenance. The result is a disturbing disconnect, a deep-seated fear of relational decay coexisting with an underdeveloped toolkit for preventing it. At its core, the fear of losing interest stems from a primal human need for belonging and attachment, intertwined with a man's sense of self-worth, often tied to his ability to be a desirable and capable partner. When he perceives a partner's interest waning, it can trigger anxieties about his adequacy, his attractiveness, or his fundamental value. This fear is often exacerbated by the subtle ways interest can manifest: less enthusiastic responses, decreased physical affection, a shift in priorities, or simply a growing emotional distance. These cues, often subtle, are keenly felt and can ignite a quiet panic within him. However, despite this profound fear, men find themselves at a loss for how to effectively counteract it. Societal scripts for men often emphasize grand gestures, problem-solving, or providing financially as expressions of love and commitment.
While these actions are valuable, they often bypass the critical, ongoing work of emotional connection and relational maintenance. Men might believe that if they continue to do things, fix problems, earn money, plan dates, the relationship will naturally thrive. They might not fully grasp that sustained interest often requires consistent emotional engagement, active listening, shared vulnerability, and the deliberate cultivation of intimacy. This gap in understanding can lead to frustrating and counterproductive behaviors. A man fearing a loss of interest might withdraw, becoming more quiet or distant, inadvertently creating the very space he fears. He might internalize the problem, believing he simply isn't enough, rather than recognizing a communication or connection issue. He might attempt to fix the perceived problem by redoubling his efforts in areas he understands, working harder, buying gifts, or planning elaborate outings. But these actions, while well-intentioned, often fail to address the underlying emotional hunger for connection that is crucial for maintaining interest. He might not know how to initiate a conversation about feelings, how to actively listen without trying to solve, or how to share his own vulnerabilities in a way that deepens intimacy. The disturbing aspect is that this fear can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. His inability to articulate his fears or to engage in effective emotional maintenance leads to a widening gap. His partner might interpret his withdrawal or his focus on superficial actions as a lack of emotional investment, which in turn genuinely diminishes her interest. He then sees his worst fears confirmed, reinforcing his sense of inadequacy and his belief that he is fundamentally incapable of maintaining connection. This cycle of fear, miscommunication, and emotional distance can slowly erode even strong relationships. It highlights a critical need for men to develop a more sophisticated understanding of emotional intelligence and relational dynamics, moving beyond traditional masculine scripts to actively nurture the delicate threads of connection that sustain love and prevent the dreaded loss of interest. 9. Men romanticize past relationships more than women. The human tendency to look back on past experiences with a degree of nostalgia is universal. Yet when it comes to past romantic relationships, there is a distinct psychological pattern observed in men, a propensity to romanticize these bygone connections more intensely and enduringly than women often do. This isn't merely a fleeting sentimentality, but a deeper, more pervasive psychological phenomenon rooted in a complex interplay of emotional processing, memory biases, and the unique ways men often cope with loss and regret. The disturbing implication is that these idealized memories can subtly or overtly influence present relationships and future expectations. One primary factor contributing to this romanticization is the way men often process emotional pain and loss. While women are often encouraged to process grief and heartbreak through open discussion, seeking support, and engaging in cathartic expression, men are frequently conditioned to internalize these emotions. They might suppress their pain, avoid dwelling on negative feelings, or channel their distress into action or distraction. This suppression, however, doesn't erase the emotions, it merely buries them. Over time, as the acute pain of a breakup subsides, the mind, in its attempt to make sense of the past and protect the self, tends to filter memories. The painful aspects, the arguments, the incompatibilities, the reasons for the breakup, recede into the background, while the positive, cherished moments are amplified and polished. This selective recall leaves behind an idealized version of the past, stripped of its complexities and imperfections.
Furthermore, men often struggle with expressing vulnerability and regret. After a breakup, particularly if they were the ones who ended it, or if they feel they contributed to its demise, there can be a profound sense of what if, or if only. Because they might not openly process these regrets, they can manifest as a romanticization of what was lost. The past relationship becomes a symbol of missed opportunities, a golden era that, in retrospect, seems perfect because the present pain of its absence is so keenly felt. This isn't necessarily a conscious desire to return to the past, but rather an emotional longing for an idealized version of it, a yearning for the comfort and familiarity that was once present.
The concept of the one that got away also seems to hold a particular psychological grip on men. This isn't always about a desire to rekindle. Sometimes it's about the emotional significance of that person as a benchmark or a missed opportunity for a perceived ideal. The woman from the past, particularly if she was the first to provide emotional safety or profound understanding, as discussed earlier, can become elevated to an almost mythical status, representing a peak emotional experience that subsequent relationships are unconsciously measured against. This idealization can create an unfair burden on current partners who are unknowingly competing with a perfected phantom of the past. Finally, the slower emotional processing often attributed to men means that the full impact of a relationship's end might take longer to register. While a woman might process the breakup more acutely in the immediate aftermath, a man might experience a delayed emotional reckoning. As time passes and he encounters new challenges or loneliness, the memories of a past relationship, having been cleansed of their negative aspects, can resurface with a romantic glow, offering a comforting, albeit distorted, sense of what once was. This romanticization, while perhaps providing a temporary emotional balm, can ultimately hinder full emotional investment in the present, casting a long, idealized shadow over new beginnings and preventing a clear-eyed appreciation of current connections. 10. Men often lack emotional boundaries. The concept of emotional boundaries is crucial for healthy relationships, defining where one person's emotional space ends and another's begins, protecting individual well-being and fostering mutual respect. While everyone can struggle with boundaries, men often exhibit a particular and disturbing deficiency in establishing and maintaining emotional boundaries, both for themselves and in their interactions with others. This isn't a deliberate choice to be boundaryless, but rather a consequence of societal conditioning that often overlooks or actively discourages the development of this vital emotional skill in men. The repercussions can be profound, leading to emotional exhaustion, blurred lines in relationships, and a diminished sense of self. One primary reason for this lack of emotional boundaries stems from the traditional masculine imperative to be strong, stoic, and self-sacrificing. Men are often taught that their role is to take care of others, to be the unwavering support, and to absorb emotional burdens without complaint. This conditioning can lead them to believe that setting boundaries, particularly emotional ones, is selfish, weak, or a failure to adequately support their loved ones. They might internalize the belief that their personal emotional needs and limits are secondary to the needs of others, leading them to consistently overextend themselves emotionally. This manifests in various ways within relationships. A man might struggle to say no to emotional demands, even when doing so depletes his own emotional reserves. He might allow his partner's moods or emotional states to completely dictate his own, absorbing her anxieties or frustrations without adequate protection. He might become overly enmeshed in her problems, feeling personally responsible for her happiness, blurring the lines between shared concern and emotional fusion. This lack of clear emotional separation can lead to a constant state of emotional reactivity, where his own internal peace is perpetually disrupted by external emotional dynamics. Furthermore, the difficulty in setting boundaries for themselves also extends to respecting the emotional boundaries of others. Because they haven't learned to define and protect their own emotional space, they might inadvertently overstep their partners. This isn't necessarily malicious. It often stems from a lack of awareness and a genuine desire to connect or fix. For instance, a man might push for emotional intimacy when his partner needs space, or offer unsolicited advice when she simply needs to be heard, failing to recognize and respect her stated or unstated emotional limits. This can lead to feelings of invasion or suffocation for the partner, creating conflict and distance. The psychological cost for men who lack emotional boundaries is significant. They are prone to emotional burnout as they constantly give without adequately replenishing their own emotional reserves. They might experience a loss of self as their identity becomes overly intertwined with their relationships, making it difficult to discern their own needs and desires from those of their partner. This can lead to resentment, a quiet bitterness that slowly poisons the well of affection, as they feel perpetually drained and unappreciated, even if they never articulate these feelings. The disturbing truth is that while the intention behind this boundaryless approach is often rooted in love and a desire to be supportive, its long-term effect is detrimental to both the man's well-being and the health of the relationship. It prevents genuine emotional autonomy, fosters codependency, and ultimately undermines the very strength and connection it aims to hold. Learning to establish and maintain healthy emotional boundaries is not an act of selfishness, but a crucial step towards fostering balanced, respectful, and sustainable intimacy. 11. Men project insecurities onto partners. The human psyche, in its intricate dance of self-preservation and defense mechanisms, often employs projection as a means of coping with uncomfortable internal realities. For men, a particularly disturbing manifestation of this mechanism within romantic relationships is the tendency to project their own deep-seated insecurities onto their partners. This isn't a conscious accusation or a deliberate attempt to undermine. Rather, it's an unconscious transfer of their own anxieties, fears, and self-doubts onto the person they are closest to, seeing those very flaws reflected back at them in their partner. The insidious nature of this projection lies in its ability to corrode a relationship from within, fostering misunderstanding, resentment, and a profound sense of unfairness for the recipient.
At the heart of this behavior lies a man's often unacknowledged and unaddressed insecurities. These might stem from childhood experiences, past failures, societal pressures to be man enough, or a pervasive sense of inadequacy in various aspects of his life, be it professional success, physical appearance, emotional intelligence, or even sexual prowess. Because men are often conditioned to suppress vulnerability and deny their own weaknesses, these insecurities don't disappear. Instead, they become internalized, festering beneath the surface. When these feelings become too uncomfortable to consciously acknowledge, the mind seeks an external outlet, a less threatening target onto which to displace them. His partner, being the closest and most emotionally significant person, often becomes this unwitting canvas. Consider a man who secretly harbors deep insecurities about his intelligence or competence. Instead of confronting these feelings within himself, he might unconsciously start to perceive his partner as overly critical, condescending, or even unintelligent. He might subtly belittle her achievements, dismiss her opinions, or react defensively to her suggestions, not because she is genuinely threatening him, but because her perceived competence triggers his own unacknowledged fears of inadequacy. Similarly, a man insecure about his physical attractiveness might become overly jealous, accusing his partner of flirting or being interested in other men, even without concrete evidence. His jealousy is not necessarily a reflection of her behavior, but a mirror of his own fear of not being desirable enough. The disturbing aspect of projection is that it distorts reality. The partner becomes burdened with attributes that are not truly hers, but rather reflections of the man's internal landscape. She might feel perpetually misunderstood, unfairly judged, or constantly under scrutiny, without understanding the root cause of this behavior. This can lead to a profound sense of confusion and frustration as she tries to address accusations that feel baseless or criticisms that seem to come from left field. She might internalize these projections, beginning to doubt herself and her own worth, inadvertently fulfilling the very insecurities the man projected onto her. Furthermore, projection creates a significant barrier to genuine intimacy and problem-solving. It's impossible to address a relationship issue effectively when one party is unconsciously fighting a battle against their own internal demons, externalized onto their partner. The man cannot acknowledge his partner's true self because he is too busy seeing his own fears reflected in her. This prevents open communication, mutual empathy, and the collaborative effort required to navigate relational challenges. Until a man confronts his own insecurities and takes responsibility for his internal landscape, the disturbing cycle of projection will continue to poison the well of his relationships, leaving both him and his partner in a state of unresolved tension and misunderstanding. 12. Men use silence as emotional protection. Silence in the landscape of human communication is rarely truly empty. It can convey contentment, contemplation,
or, perhaps most disturbingly in relationships, serve as a formidable shield of emotional protection for men. This isn't merely a preference for quiet, it's a deeply ingrained coping mechanism, a retreat into an internal fortress when faced with emotional overwhelm, conflict, or vulnerability. While women are often socialized to process emotions through verbal expression and seeking connection, men are frequently conditioned to internalize, to manage distress independently, and to avoid displaying emotional fragility. Consequently, silence becomes a strategic, albeit often misunderstood and damaging, tool for self-preservation. The roots of this behavior lie in the pervasive societal expectation for men to be stoic, rational, and in control of their emotions. Expressing distress, fear, or sadness can be perceived as a sign of weakness, a breach of the masculine ideal. When confronted with intense emotional situations, a heated argument, a partner's distress, or his own internal turmoil, a man might instinctively resort to silence. This allows him to process his thoughts and feelings without the perceived risk of saying the wrong thing, of appearing overly emotional, or of exposing a vulnerability that might be exploited or misunderstood. It grants him a temporary reprieve, a space to regain composure and reassert control over his internal state. Consider a scenario where a couple is engaged in a disagreement. As the emotional intensity rises, a man might suddenly go quiet. To his partner, this silence can feel like abandonment, indifference, or punishment. She might interpret it as a refusal to engage, a sign that he doesn't care enough to resolve the conflict. However, for the man, this silence often serves a very different purpose. He might be internally overwhelmed, struggling to articulate his thoughts coherently, or attempting to prevent an escalation that he fears will lead to further emotional pain. His silence is not an act of disengagement, but a form of emotional self-regulation, a desperate attempt to manage his internal chaos and protect himself from what he perceives as a threatening emotional environment. The disturbing aspect of using silence as protection is its profound impact on relational dynamics. While it might offer temporary relief to the man, it often creates immense distress and frustration for his partner. She is left in the dark, without communication, forced to fill the void with her own anxieties and interpretations, which are often negative. This can lead to a cycle of pursuit and withdrawal, where the partner tries harder to elicit a response, and the man retreats further into his silence, exacerbating the emotional distance. The very act intended to protect him ends up creating a chasm in the relationship, eroding trust and fostering resentment. Furthermore, relying on silence prevents genuine emotional processing and resolution. By avoiding verbal engagement, a man bypasses the opportunity to understand his own emotions more deeply, to articulate his needs, and to work collaboratively with his partner to resolve conflict. The issues remain unaddressed, festering beneath the surface. While silence can sometimes be a healthy space for reflection, its consistent use as a primary emotional defense mechanism becomes a barrier to true intimacy, leaving both partners feeling isolated and misunderstood. It underscores the profound challenge men face in navigating emotional expression, often resorting to a protective silence that, ironically, inflicts its own form of emotional damage.
13. Men pretend they don't care, even when they care deeply. The human capacity for emotional pretense is a fascinating and often painful aspect of our social interactions. But for men in romantic contexts, the act of pretending not to care, even when they care deeply, is a particularly poignant and disturbing psychological phenomenon. This isn't a casual indifference. It's a deliberate, albeit often unconscious, performance designed to shield a fragile ego, manage vulnerability, and adhere to deeply ingrained masculine scripts. The chilling implication is that this emotional masquerade can create profound misunderstandings, emotional distance, and a sense of unrequited affection, despite genuine feelings existing beneath the surface. The roots of this pretense lie firmly in societal conditioning. Men are taught from a young age that emotional investment, especially in matters of the heart, can be a sign of weakness.
To openly admit to caring deeply, particularly in the early stages of a relationship or after a perceived slight, is to expose oneself to the risk of rejection, hurt, or being perceived as needy or too emotional. To care deeply, in this societal framework, means to give away power, to become vulnerable to another's actions. Therefore, the pretense of not caring becomes a protective armor, a way to maintain emotional control and project an image of detached strength, even when his internal world is awash with profound feeling. This pretense manifests in myriad ways. After an argument, a man might quickly pivot to a seemingly unbothered demeanor, even though he's internally distressed and yearning for reconciliation. He might delay responding to messages, act nonchalant about plans, or avoid initiating contact, not because he's disinterested, but because he fears appearing overly eager or invested. He might use humor to deflect serious emotional conversations, or insist that it's fine when it's clearly not, all to maintain the illusion of emotional resilience. This performance is particularly potent in situations where he feels uncertain about the reciprocation of his feelings. To admit he cares deeply when he's unsure if his feelings are returned feels like an unbearable risk, so he retreats behind the facade of indifference. The disturbing aspect of this behavior is the emotional toll it takes on both the man and his partner. For the man, it's an exhausting internal struggle, a constant battle between his true feelings and the image he feels compelled to project. He might experience profound loneliness, a sense that his deepest affections are unseen and unappreciated, precisely because he's actively hiding them. The pretense becomes a barrier to genuine intimacy, preventing him from experiencing the full joy and vulnerability of open affection. For his partner, this pretense can be incredibly confusing and hurtful. She might interpret his apparent indifference as a genuine lack of feeling, leading to feelings of rejection, insecurity, or a belief that he simply doesn't care enough. This can erode trust, foster resentment, and ultimately drive a wedge between them. She might stop trying to connect emotionally, convinced that her efforts are futile, unaware that beneath the seemingly cold exterior lies a heart that cares deeply but is too afraid to show it. The tragic irony is that the very act intended to protect him from hurt often leads to the very outcome he fears, emotional distance and a potential loss of connection, all because he couldn't bring himself to reveal the depth of his true affection. 14. Men's emotions intensify when they can't control outcomes. The human desire for control is a fundamental psychological drive, offering a sense of predictability, security, and agency in an often chaotic world. For men, who are frequently socialized to be problem solvers, leaders, and masters of their own destiny, the inability to control outcomes can trigger a particularly potent and disturbing intensification of their emotions. This isn't just about frustration. It's a profound psychological response where a man's emotional landscape, typically managed through suppression or rationalization, becomes volatile and amplified when faced with situations beyond his sphere of influence, especially in matters of the heart. The core of this phenomenon lies firmly in the masculine identity often being intertwined with competence and effectiveness. To be unable to control a situation, particularly one that deeply impacts his emotional well-being or the well-being of his loved ones, can feel like a direct assault on his sense of self. It challenges his perceived role as a protector, a provider, or a capable individual. When this sense of agency is undermined, the emotional floodgates, typically held shut by conscious effort, can begin to crack. Consider scenarios within a relationship. If a partner is going through a personal crisis, a job loss, a family illness, or a deep emotional struggle, a man's instinct is often to fix it. He wants to find solutions, offer practical advice, and make the problem disappear. This desire stems from a place of care and a need to exert control over the situation to alleviate suffering. However, when the problem is intractable, when there are no immediate solutions, or when his partner simply needs emotional support rather than a fix, his inability to control the outcome can become incredibly frustrating. This frustration, rather than manifesting as quiet concern, can quickly morph into anger, anxiety, or a profound sense of helplessness, precisely because his usual coping mechanisms of active problem solving are rendered ineffective. Similarly, in the delicate dance of romantic connection, the inability to control a partner's feelings or decisions can be profoundly unsettling. If a relationship is on rocky ground, or if his partner is expressing doubts, a man might feel an intense surge of emotions, fear of loss, jealousy, anger, or despair, precisely because he cannot directly force her to feel a certain way or dictate the relationship's trajectory. His usual strategies of effort, logic, or persuasion might fail, leaving him feeling powerless. This perceived powerlessness can lead to an emotional amplification, where his feelings become more intense, more erratic, and often more difficult for him to manage or express constructively. He might lash out in anger, withdraw completely, or become overly demanding, all as desperate attempts to regain a semblance of control over an uncontrollable situation.
The disturbing aspect is that this intensification of emotions, fueled by a loss of control, can be deeply unsettling for both the man and his partner. He might feel overwhelmed by feelings he usually suppresses, leading to behaviors that are out of character or destructive. His partner, witnessing this emotional volatility, might become confused, frightened, or alienated, further exacerbating the very situation he is trying to influence. This dynamic highlights a critical vulnerability in the male psyche, the profound discomfort with relinquishing control, and the often volatile emotional landscape that emerges when faced with the undeniable reality that some outcomes, especially in the realm of human connection and emotion, are simply beyond his grasp. Learning to surrender to the uncontrollable and to process the emotions that arise from that surrender is a profound and often challenging journey for many men. 15. Men fall in love visually but stay in love emotionally. The journey of love, for many men, often begins with a spark ignited by the visual, a primal attraction to aesthetics and physical form. Yet the enduring flame of love, the kind that withstands the tests of time and tribulation, is fueled not by what is seen, but by what is felt and understood on an emotional level. This distinction between the initial catalyst for attraction and the sustaining force of attachment represents a profound and often paradoxical psychological truth within the male experience of love. The disturbing implication is that while a man might be drawn in by the superficial, the depth of his commitment is contingent on a far more intricate and less tangible emotional landscape, a fact often misunderstood by both men and women. The initial pull of visual attraction is undeniable and biologically wired. Evolutionary psychology suggests that physical cues, symmetry, vitality, health, signal fertility and good genes, making them powerful, often subconscious drivers of initial interest. For men, this visual gateway is frequently the first point of entry into the romantic arena. A woman's appearance, her smile, her demeanor, her style, these are the initial stimuli that capture his attention, pique her curiosity, and motivate him to pursue further interaction. This phase is characterized by an almost instantaneous assessment, a visceral reaction that precedes deeper emotional engagement. It's the falling part, often swift and intense, driven by the immediate gratification of the senses. However, the transition from this initial visual captivation to a deep, abiding love is where the emotional component becomes paramount. Once a man moves past the superficial and begins to truly engage with a woman, his affections shift from mere attraction to genuine attachment, contingent on the emotional connection he experiences. It is here that factors like emotional safety, understanding, shared values, intellectual stimulation, and mutual respect take stage. The initial visual appeal might open the door, but it is the emotional resonance that invites him to stay, to build, and to commit. Consider the psychological journey. A man might be initially captivated by a woman's appearance. He pursues her, spends time with her, and as they interact, he begins to discover her personality, her humor, her kindness, her intelligence, her vulnerabilities. If these deeper qualities align with his emotional needs, if she makes him feel understood, safe, cherished, or challenged in a positive way, then the initial visual attraction transforms into something far more profound. His love becomes rooted in the emotional landscape they share, the intimacy they build, and the feeling of partnership that develops.
The physical attraction, while still present and important, becomes integrated into a larger, more complex tapestry of emotional connection. The disturbing aspect of this distinction lies in the potential for misunderstanding. A woman might worry that as her physical appearance inevitably changes over time, her partner's love will wane, failing to recognize that his sustained love is anchored in something far deeper. Conversely, a man might initially prioritize physical attributes, only to find that without a strong emotional foundation, the relationship feels hollow and unfulfilling, despite the initial attraction. This highlights the crucial lesson that while the eye might first wander, the heart ultimately seeks a home not in superficial beauty, but in profound emotional connection. The visual initiates, but the emotional sustains, making the journey from initial glance to lasting love a testament to the intricate interplay between sight and soul. 16. Men often suppress affection due to fear of rejection. The expression of affection, a fundamental building block of intimacy and connection in any relationship, often presents a complex psychological hurdle for men. Beneath a seemingly stoic exterior or a reluctance to initiate overt displays of tenderness, there frequently lies a profound and disturbing fear, the fear of rejection. This isn't merely a casual apprehension, it's a deeply ingrained psychological defense mechanism that compels men to suppress their genuine affectionate impulses, creating a silent barrier between their true feelings and their outward behavior. The consequence is a potential emotional disconnect where deep affection goes unexpressed, leading both partners feeling unfulfilled. The roots of this fear are multifaceted. Firstly, societal conditioning often teaches men that vulnerability, especially in expressing tender emotions, can be perceived as a weakness. To openly offer affection, whether physical or verbal, is to put oneself in a position of emotional exposure, creating an opportunity for that affection to be rejected, dismissed, or not reciprocated. This perceived risk of rejection carries a significant psychological weight, as it can be interpreted as a blow to their masculinity, their desirability, or their worthiness of love. The pain of potential rejection, having been experienced or witnessed in the past, can lead to a proactive suppression of affection as a self-protective measure. Secondly, men are often less practiced in the nuanced language of emotional expression compared to women. They might genuinely feel deep affection, but struggle with how to articulate it in a way that feels natural or appropriate. This lack of fluency, combined with the fear of getting it wrong or being misunderstood, can lead to a default strategy of suppression. It's easier and seemingly safer to keep the affection internalized than to risk an awkward or unreciprocated display. This is particularly true if past attempts at expressing affection were met with indifference, comfort, or even ridicule. This suppression manifests in various ways. A man might feel a strong urge to hold his partner's hand, offer a comforting touch, or express a loving sentiment, but he hesitates. He might rationalize his inaction by telling himself, "She knows I care," or "It's not the right time." He might opt for more indirect expressions of care, such as acts of service or providing, which are less overt emotional and therefore feel safer. His physical affection might be limited to sexual intimacy, where the context of passion provides a perceived permission for touch, but he struggles with non-sexual tenderness. The internal conflict between his genuine desire to connect and his fear of vulnerability can be a constant, exhausting battle.
The disturbing implication of this suppressed affection is the emotional distance it creates within a relationship. His partner might interpret his lack of overt affection as a lack of love, a sign that he is emotionally unavailable or that she is not desirable enough. This can lead to her feeling unloved, insecure, and disconnected, even if he cares for her deeply. The unexpressed affection becomes a silent void, a source of unspoken longing and misunderstanding. It prevents the natural flow of intimacy, denying both partners the warmth, reassurance, and emotional nourishment that affectionate gestures provide. Overcoming this fear requires immense courage from the man, and often a patient, understanding partner who can create a safe space for him to tentatively express his true feelings without fear of judgment or rejection, slowly dismantling the protective walls he has built around his deepest affections. 17.
Men crave physical touch for emotional reassurance. The human need for physical touch is fundamental, deeply wired into our biology from birth, playing a crucial role in bonding, comfort, and emotional regulation. For men, this craving for physical touch, particularly in romantic relationships, takes on a profound significance as a primary conduit for emotional reassurance. While often associated with sexual desire, the male yearning for touch extends far beyond the erotic. It is a deep, often subconscious plea for validation, comfort, and a tangible affirmation of connection and love. The disturbing truth is that this vital emotional need is frequently misunderstood or overlooked, leaving many men feeling emotionally starved despite being in intimate relationships. Societal norms often restrict the types and contexts of touch deemed acceptable for men. Outside of romantic relationships, men receive significantly less non-sexual physical touch compared to women. This scarcity can heighten the significance of touch within a partnership, making it an even more potent source of emotional sustenance. For many men, words of affirmation, while appreciated, can sometimes feel abstract or fleeting. Physical touch, however, offers a concrete, undeniable form of reassurance. A hand on the arm, a hug, a gentle caress. These gestures communicate love, acceptance, and security in a way that bypasses the need for verbal articulation, which men often struggle with. When a man receives non-sexual physical touch from his partner, it triggers a cascade of physiological and psychological benefits. It releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone, reducing stress, fostering feelings of trust, and deepening attachment. It provides a sense of being grounded, connected, and emotionally safe. For a man who might be internally battling insecurities, anxieties, or the emotional numbness discussed earlier, a simple touch can be a powerful balm, a silent affirmation that he is loved, valued, and not alone. It acts as a direct emotional line, bypassing the complex filters of verbal communication and intellectual processing. The disturbing aspect is that this profound need for emotional reassurance through touch is often misunderstood. A partner might assume that a man's desire for physical closeness is purely sexual, or she might mistake her less verbal nature for a lack of emotional need. Consequently, she might inadvertently withhold the very non-sexual touch he craves, leading to a profound emotional deficit. He might feel a quiet longing, a subtle ache for connection that he struggles to articulate. This unfulfilled need can manifest as a sense of emotional distance, even when physically intimate, or a feeling of unloved, despite his partner's verbal assurances. Furthermore, a man might not even consciously recognize or articulate this craving himself, having been conditioned to suppress such needy expressions. He might simply feel a general sense of unease or dissatisfaction in the relationship, attributing it to other factors, when in reality, a consistent, affectionate, non-sexual touch could significantly alleviate his emotional hunger. The absence of this vital form of reassurance can leave him feeling emotionally adrift, struggling to feel truly connected and secure within the relationship, highlighting the critical importance of understanding and fulfilling this often unspoken male need for physical touch as a pathway to emotional well-being and profound intimacy. 18. Men use distractions, work, hobbies, games to avoid emotional pain. The landscape of human coping mechanisms is vast and varied, but for men, a particularly prevalent and often disturbing strategy for navigating emotional pain is the deliberate immersion in distractions. Whether it's relentless work, consuming hobbies, or engaging in competitive games, these activities often serve more than just leisure or productivity. They become powerful psychological buffers, elaborate escapes designed to divert attention from uncomfortable feelings and to avoid confronting the raw, often overwhelming reality of emotional distress. This isn't a sign of indifference, but rather a profound, often unconscious attempt at self-preservation, with significant implications for their emotional health and relational intimacy. The genesis of this behavior lies in the pervasive societal conditioning that discourages men from openly expressing or processing emotional pain. From a young age, boys are taught to suck it up, to be strong, and to solve problems rather than dwell on feelings. This creates an internal environment where emotional pain, such as grief, heartbreak, fear, or insecurity, is perceived as something to be managed internally, suppressed, or simply ignored. Confronting these feelings directly can feel threatening, exposing a vulnerability that contradicts the masculine ideal. Therefore, seeking refuge in external activities becomes a highly effective, albeit temporary, solution. Work, in particular, becomes a potent sanctuary. A man experiencing emotional turmoil might throw himself into his career, working longer hours, taking on more projects, or becoming obsessively focused on professional achievements. The structured demands of work, the tangible goals, and the external validation it can provide offer a compelling alternative to grappling with internal chaos. The mental energy required for professional tasks effectively crowds out space for painful emotions, providing a temporary sense of control and purpose amidst personal distress. Similarly, hobbies and games serve a parallel function. Whether it's intense physical activity, intricate model building, competitive sports, or immersive video games, these activities demand focus, provide a sense of accomplishment, and offer a clear escape from the self. The intense concentration required to master a skill or win a game can effectively silence the internal monologue of pain, offering a temporary reprieve. The camaraderie found in team sports or gaming communities can also provide a sense of connection without the emotional demands of deep vulnerability, offering a safe, superficial form of belonging.
The disturbing aspect of this coping mechanism is its long-term impact. While distractions offer immediate relief, they prevent genuine emotional processing and healing. The pain doesn't disappear. It merely gets compartmentalized, festering beneath the surface, often manifesting later as irritability, anxiety, depression, or even physical ailments. This avoidance creates a profound emotional disconnect. A man might appear distant, preoccupied, or emotionally unavailable to his partner, who may interpret his immersion in distractions as a lack of interest or a refusal to engage. She might feel neglected or secondary to his activities, leading to resentment and a widening emotional chasm. Furthermore, this reliance on distraction hinders the development of healthier coping strategies. A man might never learn how to sit with uncomfortable emotions, how to articulate his feelings, or how to seek genuine emotional support. The cycle of pain and distraction becomes entrenched, making it increasingly difficult for him to engage authentically in his relationships and to experience the full spectrum of emotional life. Ultimately, while work, hobbies, and games can be healthy outlets, their consistent use as a primary means to avoid emotional pain reveals a disturbing pattern of self-silencing that can deeply compromise a man's well-being and his capacity for true intimacy. 19. Men fear disappointing their partners more than losing them. The fear of loss is a potent human motivator capable of driving profound actions and shaping relationships. However, for many men, a particularly disturbing and often unacknowledged fear takes precedence over the existential dread of losing a partner, the fear of disappointing them. This isn't a subtle nuance. It's a deep-seated psychological anxiety rooted in societal conditioning, a man's sense of identity, and the profound weight of perceived responsibility. The implication is that this fear can lead to self-sacrificing behaviors, suppressed needs, and a constant internal pressure to perform, ultimately compromising both his well-being and the authenticity of the relationship. The genesis of this fear lies in the masculine narrative that often equates a man's worth with his ability to provide, protect, and meet expectations. From a young age, men are taught that their value is often tied to their competence, their strength, and their capacity to be a reliable anchor for others. In a romantic partnership, this translates into an immense pressure to be the ideal partner, strong, supportive, successful, emotionally stable, and capable of fulfilling his partner's needs and desires. The thought of failing in this role, of falling short of her expectations, or of causing her unhappiness can be more terrifying than the prospect of her physical absence.
Losing her implies a failure of the relationship, but disappointing her implies a failure of him. This fear manifests in various, often subtle ways. A man might consistently prioritize his partner's needs and desires over his own, even to his own detriment. He might agree to activities he doesn't enjoy, suppress his opinions to avoid conflict, or take on emotional burdens that are not his, all to maintain her happiness and avoid the dreaded look of disappointment. He might internalize her unspoken expectations, constantly striving to meet them, even if those expectations are unclear or unrealistic. This creates a perpetual state of anxiety, a constant internal barometer checking if he is doing enough or being enough to keep her satisfied. The disturbing aspect of this fear is its insidious nature. It can lead to a profound lack of authenticity in the relationship. By constantly molding himself to avoid disappointment, a man can lose touch with his own desires, needs, and boundaries. He might suppress his true self, creating a version of himself that he believes his partner wants, leading to a sense of emotional exhaustion and resentment. His partner, in turn, might be interacting with a curated version of him, never truly knowing his authentic self, leading to a superficial connection despite the depth of his efforts. Furthermore, this fear can paradoxically contribute to the very outcome he dreads. His constant self-sacrifice and suppression of his own needs can lead to burnout, emotional numbness, or a quiet withdrawal. His partner might then perceive him as distant, unengaged, or lacking genuine passion, leading to dissatisfaction and, ironically, the very disappointment he sought so desperately to avoid. The fear of disappointing becomes a heavy cloak, stifling his individuality and preventing the genuine, reciprocal exchange that forms the bedrock of a healthy, fulfilling relationship. It underscores the profound psychological burden many carry, striving to meet an often unattainable ideal driven by a fear that runs deeper than mere loss, the fear of being found wanting in the eyes of the one they cherish. 20. Men struggle to ask for help due to pride conditioning. The act of asking for help, a fundamental aspect of human interdependence and a sign of self-awareness, often presents a formidable and disturbing challenge for men, largely due to deeply entrenched pride conditioning. This isn't merely a reluctance, it's a profound psychological barrier, a pervasive internal script that equates seeking assistance with weakness, incompetence, or a failure of masculinity. The consequence is a silent struggle, where men often endure immense pressure, stress, and emotional turmoil in isolation, rather than reaching out for the support they desperately need. From a young age, boys are bombarded with messages that reinforce self-sufficiency and strength. They are taught to be independent, to solve their own problems, and to avoid appearing vulnerable or needy. Phrases like, "be a man," "figure it out yourself," or "don't be a crybaby," subtly or overtly instill the belief that asking for help is an admission of failure, a dent in their masculine armor. This conditioning creates a rigid internal framework where pride becomes a powerful gatekeeper, preventing them from acknowledging their limitations or their need for external support. This struggle manifests across various domains of a man's life, but it is particularly poignant in emotional and relational contexts. A man might be struggling with significant mental health issues, professional burnout, or profound relationship difficulties, yet he will rarely initiate a conversation about these struggles or seek professional help. He might internalize the problem, believing he should be able to handle it alone, or that admitting he needs help would diminish him in the eyes of his partner, friends, or family. The fear of appearing weak, incompetent, or a burden often outweighs the pressing need for assistance.
Consider the dynamic within a romantic relationship. A man might be overwhelmed by responsibilities, feeling emotionally drained, or struggling to navigate a complex conflict. Instead of articulating his need for support, a listening ear, or practical help, he might withdraw into silence, become irritable, or immerse himself in distractions, as previously discussed. His partner might perceive this as emotional distance or a lack of care, unaware that he is silently battling a profound internal struggle, paralyzed by his pride from asking for the very help that could alleviate his burden and strengthen their connection. The disturbing aspect of this pride conditioning is its detrimental impact on men's well-being and the health of their relationships.
By refusing to ask for help, men deny themselves access to crucial resources, both emotional and practical. This can lead to prolonged suffering, exacerbated problems, and a heightened risk of mental health crises. Furthermore, it creates a barrier to genuine intimacy. True connection is built on mutual vulnerability and the willingness to support each other. When a man consistently presents an image of unwavering self-sufficiency, he inadvertently pushes his partner away, denying her the opportunity to offer care and participate in his emotional world. The cycle is vicious. His pride prevents him from asking for help, which leads to increased stress and isolation, which in turn reinforces his belief that he must be strong and independent. Breaking this cycle requires a conscious effort to challenge deeply ingrained beliefs about masculinity, to reframe asking for help not as a weakness, but as an act of courage and self-awareness, and to create environments where men feel safe enough to shed the burdensome cloak of pride and embrace the vulnerability of interdependence. 21. Men's emotional trauma resurfaces during love. The human capacity for love is often seen as a healing force, a balm for past wounds. Yet for many men, the very act of entering into a deep loving relationship can paradoxically become a catalyst for the resurfacing of unresolved emotional trauma. This isn't a flaw in the love itself, but rather a profound and often disturbing psychological phenomenon where the safety, intimacy, and vulnerability inherent in a committed partnership create the very conditions under which buried pains, fears, and unprocessed experiences from the past are brought back to the surface, demanding confrontation. Emotional trauma, whether from childhood neglect, abandonment, betrayal, or other deeply hurtful experiences, doesn't simply disappear. It gets compartmentalized, often buried deep within the psyche, influencing behavior, emotional responses, and relational patterns in subtle, unconscious ways. Men, in particular, are often less equipped or encouraged to process trauma openly. They might intellectualize their pain, suppress it with distractions, or adopt coping mechanisms that allow them to function without directly confronting the wound. This allows them to navigate everyday life and even casual relationships with a degree of emotional distance. However, when a man falls deeply in love and enters a relationship characterized by genuine intimacy and emotional safety, the dynamics shift. The partner becomes a secure attachment figure, a person with whom he feels safe enough to potentially lower his guard. This newfound safety, while deeply desired, can also be profoundly unsettling. The very conditions that foster deep connection, trust, vulnerability, interdependence, are precisely the conditions that trigger the memories and feelings associated with past traumas. It's as if the protective psychological walls, maintained for years, begin to crumble under the warmth of genuine affection, allowing the repressed emotions to seep through. This resurfacing can manifest in various disturbing ways. A man who experienced abandonment in childhood might suddenly become overly possessive or intensely fearful of his partner leaving, even without any real threat. A man who experienced betrayal might develop profound trust issues, projecting past hurts onto his current partner, scrutinizing her actions, or becoming suspicious without cause. A man who was emotionally neglected might struggle with intimacy, pushing his partner away when she gets too close, or becoming emotionally numb as a defense mechanism against the overwhelming feelings that intimacy evokes. These reactions are not about the current partner's actions, but are echoes of past wounds, playing out in the present. The disturbing aspect is that these trauma responses can be incredibly confusing and damaging to the relationship. The partner might feel unfairly targeted, blamed for past hurts she didn't inflict, or pushed away by behaviors she doesn't understand. She might interpret his reactions as a lack of love or a genuine flaw in their connection, unaware that she is witnessing the painful resurfacing of historical wounds. For the man, it's a terrifying experience as he confronts feelings he thought he had overcome, often without the language or tools to articulate what is happening. He might feel overwhelmed, ashamed, or convinced that he is fundamentally broken, leading to further withdrawal or self-sabotage. Ultimately, while challenging, the resurfacing of trauma in a loving relationship can also be an opportunity for profound healing. It forces the man to confront what he has long suppressed, ideally with the support of his partner and perhaps professional help. It highlights the critical truth that love in its deepest form demands authenticity, and part of that authenticity involves acknowledging and working through the shadows of one's past, even when those shadows are disturbing and painful. 22. Men hide fear of losing independence. Independence, the ability to act and make choices without external control, is a cornerstone of masculine identity for many men, deeply intertwined with their sense of self-worth and autonomy. Consequently, within the context of a romantic relationship, there often exists a profound and disturbing hidden fear, the fear of losing this cherished independence. This isn't a fear of the partner themselves, but rather a deep-seated anxiety about the perceived encroachment on their personal freedom, their individual identity, and their capacity for self-direction that a committed partnership might entail. This unspoken fear can subtly or overtly influence their behavior, creating distance and misunderstanding. The roots of this fear are multifaceted. From a young age, men are often encouraged to be self-reliant, to forge their own path, and to avoid being tied down. This conditioning instills a strong value for personal freedom and autonomy. Entering a committed relationship with its inherent demands for compromise, shared decision-making, and interdependence can therefore trigger a subconscious alarm. The idea of merging lives, of having to consider another person's needs and desires in every decision, can feel like a potential threat to their cherished sense of self and their hard-won independence.
This hidden fear manifests in various ways. A man might resist making future plans, even if he genuinely loves his partner, because the act of planning together feels like a loss of his individual spontaneity. He might guard his personal time and space jealously, retreating into hobbies or solitary activities, not because he doesn't value his partner's company, but because these moments are crucial for reaffirming his individual identity. He might struggle with cohabitation, even after years of dating, because the constant presence of another person feels like an erosion of his personal domain. He might avoid defining the relationship or making long-term commitments, not out of a lack of feeling, but out of a subconscious reluctance to fully surrender to the perceived constraints of partnership. The disturbing aspect of this hidden fear is that it often goes unarticulated, leading to profound misunderstandings and resentment within the relationship. His partner might interpret his resistance to commitment, his need for space, or his reluctance to fully merge lives as a lack of love, a sign of emotional unavailability, or a rejection of her. She might feel neglected, unprioritized, or as if he is perpetually keeping her at arm's length, unaware that he is silently battling an internal conflict between his love for her and his deep-seated anxiety about losing his sense of self. For the man, this fear creates an internal tension. He loves his partner and desires the connection, but he also feels a constant pull to protect his autonomy. This can lead to a push-pull dynamic, where he draws close, then retreats, creating a confusing and emotionally exhausting cycle. He might feel guilty for these feelings, believing they are selfish or indicative of a flaw in his love, further compelling him to hide them. Ultimately, healthy relationships require a balance between interdependence and individual autonomy. When the fear of losing independence remains hidden and unaddressed, it becomes a silent saboteur, preventing full emotional investment and creating an invisible barrier to the deeper intimacy that both partners ultimately crave. Acknowledging this fear, rather than hiding it, is the first step towards finding a healthy equilibrium where love and independence can coexist. 23. Men often confuse withdrawal with space. The need for space in a relationship is a healthy and often necessary component of individual well-being, allowing for self-reflection, personal growth, and a return to the partnership with renewed energy. However, for many men, there is a profound and disturbing tendency to confuse genuine healthy space with emotional withdrawal, leading to significant misunderstandings and emotional distress within their relationships.
This isn't a deliberate conflation, but rather a behavioral pattern rooted in their unique emotional processing styles and societal conditioning, which often blurs the lines between healthy self-regulation and damaging emotional retreat. The distinction between space and withdrawal is crucial. Healthy space involves a temporary, communicated need for individual time or activity, with the underlying intention of returning to the relationship, often with greater clarity or renewed connection. Emotional withdrawal, on the other hand, is a defensive mechanism characterized by a retreat from emotional engagement, a closing off of communication, and an avoidance of conflict or intimacy. It's a psychological disengagement, often without clear communication or a stated intention to reconnect emotionally. Men are often conditioned to process emotions internally and to cope with stress or conflict by retreating. When faced with emotional overwhelm, relational tension, or a perceived threat to their autonomy, their instinct might be to pull back, to go silent, or to immerse themselves in solitary activities. They might genuinely believe that this retreat is taking space, a necessary period for them to collect their thoughts, calm down, or find a solution. In their minds, this is a responsible way to manage the situation, avoiding impulsive reactions and preparing to re-engage more constructively. However, the disturbing aspect is that this internal process, when uncommunicated or prolonged, is often perceived by their partners as emotional withdrawal. For the partner, the silence, the distance, and the lack of engagement can feel like abandonment, indifference, or a punishment. She might interpret his space as a sign that he doesn't care, that he is emotionally unavailable, or a rejection of her. She might feel neglected, unprioritized, or as if he is perpetually keeping her at arm's length, unaware that he is silently battling an internal conflict between his love for her and his deep-seated anxiety about losing his sense of self. For the man, this fear creates an internal tension. He loves his partner and desires the connection, but he also feels a constant pull to protect his autonomy. This can lead to a push-pull dynamic, where he draws close, then retreats, creating a confusing and emotionally exhausting cycle. He might feel guilty for these feelings, believing they are selfish or indicative of a flaw in his love, further compelling him to hide them. Ultimately, healthy relationships require a balance between interdependence and individual autonomy. When the fear of losing independence remains hidden and unaddressed, it becomes a silent saboteur, preventing full emotional investment and creating an invisible barrier to the deeper intimacy that both partners ultimately crave. Acknowledging this fear, rather than hiding it, is the first step towards finding a healthy equilibrium where love and independence can coexist. 24. Men chase emotionally unavailable women due to unresolved wounds. The dynamics of attraction are often complex, but a particularly disturbing and self-defeating pattern observed in men is the tendency to repeatedly chase emotionally unavailable women. This isn't a conscious preference for unfulfillment. Rather, it's a profound psychological compulsion rooted in unresolved emotional wounds from their past, particularly those related to attachment, abandonment, or a pervasive sense of unworthiness. The implication is that this pursuit is not about finding love, but about unconsciously reenacting old traumas in a desperate, often futile attempt to finally win the love they were denied.
When such a man encounters an emotionally unavailable woman, she unconsciously resonates with this past blueprint. Her aloofness, her inconsistency, her reluctance to commit, or her emotional walls don't deter him. Instead, they trigger a familiar, albeit painful, sense of urgency and determination. His subconscious interprets her unavailability not as a red flag, but as a familiar puzzle to solve, an opportunity to finally earn the love he was denied in his past. He might become intensely focused on breaking down her walls, believing that if he can just fix her or make her open up, he will finally achieve the profound connection he craves. The disturbing aspect is that this pursuit is often driven by a need for validation, not genuine love for the woman as she is. He is not truly seeing her.
He is seeing a projection of his past wounds and an opportunity for belated healing. Every small sign of reciprocation, every fleeting moment of connection from the emotionally unavailable woman is amplified and interpreted as a victory, fueling his continued chase. He invests immense emotional energy, time, and effort, often neglecting healthier, more available connections, because the win of finally breaking through feels like it would be a profound validation of his worth, a belated triumph over his past hurts. However, this cycle is inherently self-defeating. The emotionally unavailable woman, by definition, is often incapable of providing the deep, consistent emotional connection he truly needs. The chase becomes an endless loop of unfulfilled longing, perpetuating the very sense of unworthiness or abandonment he is trying to overcome. The win never truly comes, or if it does, it's often fleeting and unsatisfying because the underlying wound remains unaddressed. This pattern prevents him from forming healthy, reciprocal relationships with emotionally available partners, as their ease of connection might feel unfamiliar, unchallenging, or even boring, precisely because it doesn't trigger his old, painful, yet strangely compelling emotional scripts. Breaking this cycle requires a profound recognition of his unresolved wounds and a conscious decision to seek healing rather than perpetually reenacting his past in the guise of romantic pursuit. 25. Men become possessive when insecure. Possessiveness, in its most unhealthy manifestations, is a disturbing and damaging trait within romantic relationships, often mistaken for intense love or passion. For men, this behavior is profoundly linked to, and often directly triggered by, deep-seated insecurity. It is not an expression of strength or unwavering devotion, but rather a desperate and often destructive attempt to control a partner and the relationship as a means of alleviating profound internal anxieties about self-worth, fear of abandonment, and a perceived lack of control over their own emotional landscape. The chilling implication is that possessiveness is a symptom of internal turmoil, poisoning the very connection it seeks to secure. At the core of male possessiveness lies a pervasive sense of insecurity. This can stem from a variety of sources: low self-esteem, past betrayals, unresolved attachment issues, fear of not being good enough, or a generalized anxiety about being unlovable. When a man harbors these insecurities, his partner's actions, even benign ones, can be perceived as threats to the relationship or to his sense of self. He might interpret her independence, her friendships, her career successes, or her interactions with other men as direct challenges to his position, his value, or the stability of their bond. This insecurity manifests as a desperate need for control. Unable to control his own internal fears and anxieties, he attempts to control the external environment, specifically his partner's behavior, in an effort to alleviate his distress. This control can take various forms: constant checking in, excessive jealousy over friendships, dictating her clothing choices, monitoring her social media, isolating her from others, or demanding constant reassurance and validation. These behaviors are not driven by love, but by fear: fear of losing her, fear of being replaced, fear of being inadequate, and ultimately, fear of confronting his own internal demons. The disturbing aspect of possessiveness is its corrosive effect on the relationship. While it might initially be dismissed as cute or protective by a partner, it quickly escalates into emotional abuse and control. The partner feels suffocated, distrusted, and stripped of her autonomy. Her individuality is eroded, and her sense of self is diminished under the constant scrutiny and demands. This creates a toxic environment where love cannot flourish, replaced instead by fear, resentment, and a profound imbalance of power. The possessive man, in his desperate attempt to secure the relationship and his own fragile ego, inadvertently pushes his partner away, creating the very distance and potential loss he fears. Furthermore, possessiveness is a self-perpetuating cycle. The more a man tries to control his partner, the more she might naturally resist or pull away, which then fuels his insecurities and intensifies his possessive behaviors. He might interpret her need for space or her assertion of independence as further proof that she is pulling away, leading him to tighten his grip even further. This escalating dynamic can trap both individuals in a destructive loop, where the man's insecurity drives his possessiveness, and his possessiveness drives his partner away, confirming his worst fears and perpetuating his underlying sense of inadequacy. Breaking this cycle requires a profound journey of self-reflection and healing for the man, addressing the root causes of his insecurity and learning to build trust and connection based on mutual respect and freedom rather than fear and control. As we conclude this exploration into the disturbing psychological facts about love and the male psyche, it becomes clear that the landscape of a man's heart is far more intricate, vulnerable, and often contradictory than superficial appearances suggest. From the silent yearning for emotional safety to the hidden fears of independence and the profound impact of past wounds, these truths challenge our assumptions and invite a deeper empathy. Understanding these unsettling realities is not about judgment, but about illuminating the hidden currents that shape our most intimate connections, allowing for greater compassion, clearer communication, and ultimately the possibility of building more authentic and fulfilling relationships. The journey into love, for men and women alike, is a perpetual uncovering of self and other, a courageous embrace of both the beautiful and the disturbing truths that reside within us all.